The couple raised two girls, with Stephanie being the oldest and Alexia the baby of the family. Those sisters were incredibly close and always had each other's backs. They were built on a bedrock of family loyalty, hard work, and sticking together no matter what. Their parents taught them that character counts, pushing them to chase their dreams without selling out. Growing up with that kind of structure and accountability, both of the girls really thrived. Alexia stood out, not just because she was the youngest, but because everyone knew they could count on her. She had a real spark to her, balanced by a level head, making her look like a woman going places. Her folks really admired the grit she showed. They saw her as living proof that keeping your nose to the grindstone opens doors to a better life. Jonathan Duvall was born on January 16th, 1984, in the tiny town of Villette. He grew up in a packed house with 5 siblings. His mom, Martine, watched other people's kids for a living, while his dad worked the line at a factory. But everything changed when Jonathan was 13 and his dad suddenly died of a heart attack. That loss hit him hard and cast a long shadow over the rest of his childhood. Jonathan went into a shell. He wasn't one to seek the spotlight, preferring to stay quiet, except when he was on the soccer field. He played in the local rec leagues for years, and that was basically his only social life. After high school wrapped up, Jonathan figured computers were the way to go for a career. Once he got his degree, he landed a solid job at a tech consulting firm. Coworkers called him steady and precise. You know, he wasn't boss material, but, you know, he was the guy who got it done. And everyone saw him as the quiet type who dodged drama and kept his feelings locked down tight. Back in the early 2000s, Jonathan crossed paths with Alexia Fouillot. Things moved slow at first, then got serious fast. Alexia was 4 years younger and full of life, while Jonathan seemed super shy and reserved. But opposites attract, and for both of them, this was their first real shot at love. After dating for a few years, they decided to make it official and get married. They tied the knot on July 18th, 2015, right at the town hall in Gray. It was extra special because the person marrying them was Alexia's own mom, Isabel, who was on the council. That wedding was a massive milestone for the whole clan. The newlyweds jetted off to the Pacific for their honeymoon, then came back to live in her grandparents' old place. They fixed it up and settled into what looked like a perfect start in their new home. From the sidewalk, they looked like the picture-perfect couple. They worked out together, ate right, and were always signing up for local running events. But behind closed doors, things weren't so rosy, especially with their struggle to have a baby. Jonathan looked like he'd successfully transitioned from a quiet kid to a steady, reliable adult. But deep down, he was a mess of insecurities that were about to boil over in a tragic way. Saturday morning, October 28th, 2017, kicked off like any other weekend. It was right around 9 o'clock in the morning. Alexia threw on her running gear and headed out the door for a jog. She took her usual route through the woods around Gray, a path she knew like the back of her hand. Jonathan later claimed he went straight to his IT job after she left the house. Nobody who saw him that day noticed anything off about him at all. A few hours ticked by and people started getting a bad feeling in their stomachs. Lunch came and went with no sign of Alexia. Since she never ran that long, Jonathan started blowing up her phone. He tried dialing the landline at the house too, but nobody picked up. Getting more worried by the minute, he reached out to her relatives, starting with Gregory Gay, who was married to Alexia's big sister, Stephanie. Jonathan told him that Alexia hadn't made it back yet and wasn't answering any of his calls. That immediately set off alarm bells for the family, since she was always easy to get a hold of and never just vanished. Instead of waiting around for the authorities, Jonathan and Gregory headed out to look for her themselves. They cruised down the path. She usually jogged, scanning the trails, ditches, and embankments for any trace of her. While they drove, Jonathan kept trying her cell over and over with zero luck. When they came up empty-handed, the fear set in that she might have been hurt or something bad had happened. They started calling up every hospital and emergency room in the region to check the admissions lists. Every single place gave them the same answer. Nobody fitting her description had checked in recently. By the time night fell and their own search turned up nothing the family decided they had to get law enforcement involved. Jonathan headed straight to the police station to file a report and give the officers a full rundown. He explained exactly how she went missing, mapped out where she usually ran, and noted what time she headed out the door. He also described her outfit and mentioned she didn't take her cell phone or ID with her that morning. That particular detail seemed totally out of character for someone like her. The police logged everything he said and followed the standard protocol for missing persons during those first few hours. They looked at a bunch of different scenarios right off the bat. They thought she might have tripped and fallen somewhere hard to reach, or maybe ran into a bad character. Investigators also toyed with the idea that she might have just taken off on her own. But knowing how Alexia lived her life, they scratched that theory off the list pretty fast. The biggest hurdle early on was that they had zero physical clues or leads to follow. There wasn't a single breadcrumb hinting at where she could have ended up. At first, her friends and relatives held on to the hope that she just got turned around and would walk through the door any minute. But as the clock kept ticking with no word from her, things started looking a lot more serious. Her inner circle knew this wasn't just some simple mix-up or her running late. This was a real missing persons case that triggered a chain reaction going way beyond one family's private nightmare. It turned into a full-blown investigation and quickly grabbed the public's attention. The mystery of the missing young woman spread fast, reaching well past the city limits of Gray. The hunt came to a heartbreaking end on the morning of Monday, October 30th, 2017. Searchers discovered a corpse in the woods just outside of Gray, over in the Haute-Saône region. It was a rough, overgrown spot way off the beaten track where nobody would just wander into by accident. Responding officers noticed someone had tried to mask the body with piles of leaves and branches, but the cover-up looked sloppy and rushed, like whoever did it was racing against the clock. There were clear burn marks on her clothes and skin too. Detectives figured out pretty quick that the killer tried to torch the remains to destroy the evidence. But something must have spooked them because the job wasn't finished. Forensics got to work immediately and cataloged a bunch of bruises and soft tissue damage from some kind of impact. They zeroed in on her neck, which showed unmistakable marks from being strangled. It was obvious right away that she didn't die from natural causes or some random accident. They were staring directly at the aftermath of a brutal murder. After checking the ID, their worst fears came true. It was 29-year-old Alexia Duvall, who had gone missing 2 days prior. That was the moment her family's hopes shattered into total devastation. Word got around Gray and the nearby towns in a matter of hours, since everyone talks in a close-knit place like that. The locals were shaken to the core because violent crimes like that just didn't happen around there. A lot of folks couldn't wrap their heads around such a savage act happening right in their own backyard. Hometown reporters jumped on the story almost immediately. Every local paper, blog, and TV channel blasted the discovery across the airwaves. And before long, the rumor mill was spinning out of control. People started guessing right away that some random maniac was behind it. Journalists threw around ideas about a lurking predator, with a few even hinting that this might not be his first time striking. Folks took to social media to swap gossip and wild guesses, which just cranked up the panic grip in the neighborhood. Both the detectives and the locals couldn't stop fixating on the specific spot where her remains turned up. That patch of woods was always seen as safe, a go-to place for anyone wanting some fresh air. You'd always see folks jogging, biking, walking their pups, or strolling around with their kids. But after the news broke, ladies who used to run solo at dawn started talking about how creepy it felt now. Chats over the backyard fence and at the water cooler kept circling back to one scary thought. The danger might not be some outsider. It could be a guy living right down the street. That possibility lit a fire under everyone, spreading nerves and mistrust through the whole town. Burn marks found on Alexia, and her clothes turned into a huge piece of the puzzle. To the crime scene techs, this meant the killer didn't just snap. He was trying hard to cover his tracks. Using fire looked like a calculated move to hide how she died and get rid of any DNA he might have left behind. While the cops saw it as a cover-up, most of the townspeople saw something way more terrifying, a cruel streak that made the killer seem even more twisted in their minds. Once they officially confirmed the body was Alexia Duvall, the whole case shifted gears. What started as a search for a lost woman was now a full-blown murder hunt. More police squads were dispatched to secure the scene where she was found. Detectives combed every inch of the ground, bagging anything that looked remotely important: old cigarette butts, torn cloth, boot prints, or any tiny clue that could help piece the story together. They looked at a bunch of different angles. Cops weighed the chances of a random mugging, a chance meeting gone wrong, or a targeted hit. Even with so many options, the most likely story still seemed to be an ambush by an outsider. Some unknown creep whose actions matched the messy scene and the clues left behind. The probe moved forward with a heavy weight on everyone, especially since this quiet town almost never saw blood. Locals demanded answers while the press watched every move the cops made like hawks. A thick cloud of dread and doubt started settling over the neighborhood. Joggers started running in packs, and parents kept kids in after dark, signaling the end of the hopeful phase. The search for Alexia Duvall was officially a homicide investigation now. Things got serious fast, with the case drawing huge interest from the police brass and the general public alike. As the probe heated up, everyone's eyes slowly shifted to Alexia's relatives. Her loved ones suddenly found themselves under a massive microscope. Finding her body in the woods set off a chain of heartbreaking tasks, like arranging the burial, holding wakes, and organizing vigils, all showing the town's shared grief and solidarity. Leading these events was Jonathan Duvall, her husband, who stuck like glue to her parents, Isabelle and Jean-Pierre Fouillot. At every service, he was right there next to them, a moment caught by every camera and news crew present. He looked like a guy who was totally wrecked but determined to honor his wife properly. The press studied his behavior, painting him as a quiet, reserved man who had lost his rock. Whenever he spoke up, whether chatting with neighbors or giving a speech at the service, Jonathan talked about how much he adored Alexia, her zest for living, and her passion for staying fit. He kept his voice low and his emotions in check, and which just made his sorrow seem that much more real to everyone watching. And a standout moment happened on November 5th, 2017, during a march in her honor. Roughly 10,000 people showed up for the walk, which was a massive turnout for such a small town. Everyone moved in silence, with plenty of folks clutching photos of Alexia or carrying white flowers. The event turned into a powerful sign of how the community shared the grief and stood together. Jonathan led the way, right at the front, walking step for step with Alexia's mom and dad. He really cemented his public image as a husband, completely destroyed by his loss. Once the walk wrapped up, a few people went up to say a few words. Alexia's parents were the first ones to take the microphone. Isabelle described her daughter as sharp and tough, while Jean-Pierre gave a heartfelt thanks to everyone who had the family's back during these brutal days. Then it was Jonathan's turn to step up and talk to the crowd. His speech was broadcast across a bunch of TV channels and was incredibly heartbreaking to watch. He called Alexia his oxygen, saying she was the only thing that gave him strength and kept him going. People took his words as the honest truth, seeing him as a guy totally broken by sadness. The news outlets ran with that story immediately. Papers splashed photos of Jonathan on the front page under big headlines about tragic romance and loss. They painted him as this symbol of resilience, trying to survive a nightmare. To the outside world, he looked like the dream son-in-law and husband, a guy sharing the family's pain and bringing everyone together to remember her. As soon as they found Alexia's body, detectives started zeroing in on the people in her inner circle. It is standard protocol in cases like this to look at the husband or wife before anyone else. That explains why, just a few days after the tragedy, Jonathan Duvall ended up squarely in the middle of the probe. At the start, his story was straightforward and didn't change a bit. Jonathan claimed he was at his job fixing a printer from around 10:30 that Saturday morning and had no clue where Alexia was during that time. But it didn't take long for his version of events to start unraveling. Police spotted holes in his timeline, things that were out of order, and details that just didn't add up. They were especially worried about the injuries on him, like scratches on his neck and bite marks on his arms. When they asked him about the marks, Jonathan said he and Alexia had gotten into a fight the night before. He insisted it was a quick spat with no lasting issues, but the wounds looked like they came from a much nastier struggle. Instead of clearing his name, the alibi Jonathan gave just sparked a whole lot more questions. They confirmed he was physically at the office that Saturday, sure, but nobody could say for sure exactly how long he actually stayed there. Security footage and witness statements couldn't prove his timing, which made his story look pretty shaky. While that was happening, investigators tore through the couple's house looking for clues. They paid special attention to clothes and fabrics. Lab experts matched the bed sheet found wrapped around the body to a set right there in their home. That detail turned into a massive piece of the puzzle, and it strongly suggested the crime happened inside the house and the body was moved to the woods later. Police also gave Jonathan's car a very thorough going over. His work vehicle had a tracker installed, which became a key part of the case. The data showed the car was near the spot where her body was found on the night of October 27th to the 28th. Even worse for him, tire tracks found near the scene were a perfect match for the treads on Jonathan's car. All these findings just piled more suspicion onto Jonathan. In the public eye, he kept playing the part of the grieving widower perfectly. But the gaps in his story and the way he was acting were getting way too hard to ignore. Initially, Jonathan swore up and down that he didn't drive anywhere the night his wife vanished. But cell tower pings, witnesses, and camera footage told a completely different story. This was a turning point for the detectives. It proved his version of the night didn't match the cold, hard facts. At this stage, the investigation hadn't officially reached a final verdict. Police were still gathering proof, talking to people, and chasing leads about a possible third person involved. But the crosshairs were definitely moving toward Jonathan. The difference between the good guy he played on TV and the ugly truth coming out in the files was getting obvious to everyone. When the first real clues hinting at his potential involvement started to surface, Jonathan's whole attitude began to shift. During questioning and face-to-face showdowns, he started backing away from his original story. Little by little, he went from denying everything to trying to pin the blame on other people. During a key interrogation in January 2018, Jonathan dropped a bombshell accusation. He claimed his brother-in-law, Gregory Gay, was the one actually responsible for Alexia's death. He took it even further, saying Alexia's parents and her sister were in on it and had plotted to cover it up. These claims totally clashed with his earlier statements and seemed wildly unlikely, especially since all the evidence pointed elsewhere. The fallout from his words went way beyond the police station and hit the Fouillot family hard. It caused them absolutely devastating emotional pain. People who once treated Jonathan like a son were now listening to him accuse their own flesh and blood of murder. The public was shocked too. The guy everyone thought was a grieving widower was suddenly accusing the victim's family of hiding the truth. Detectives, for their part, kept their poker faces and stayed neutral. They stated clearly that there wasn't a shred of direct evidence linking Gregory Gay to the crime. Every bit of forensic data and circumstantial proof pointed straight at Jonathan. His blame shifting looked like a desperate move to dodge the heat and buy time. With all this new drama unfolding, the police brought in shrinks and psychological experts. They ran deep evaluations to figure out why Jonathan was acting so strangely. Early reports described a guy with a personality, prone to sudden aggression, hiding deep anger, and serious insecurity issues. They noted his low self-esteem, how he bottled up feelings, and his tendency to explode when he couldn't hold it in anymore. Another team of experts pointed out his weird dependence on his mom and his total inability to make decisions alone. The files said he would dodge conflict at all costs in his daily life, but under high pressure behind closed doors, he could snap with sudden wild reactions. This psychological profile helped make sense of why he kept flip-flopping between confessing and denying everything. Throughout 2018, this instability became Jonathan's trademark behavior. He'd admit to some facts and accept a little guilt, only to take it back later and blame Gregory or the whole family again. Detectives saw this as a calculated tactic to drag out the process, ease the pressure, and muddy the waters. For the family, though, it felt like a knife in the back, a direct attack on their honor. People who had stood right by him at the memorial were now watching him point the finger at them. The public's view of Jonathan did a complete 180. From then on, his denial strategy started blowing up in his face, cranking up the legal and social heat. By the end of 2018, the investigation into Jonathan Duvall hit a make or break point. The mountain of evidence got too big to ignore, and for the first time, he admitted he played a direct role in killing Alexia. On November 23rd, he stated that on the night of October 28th, 2017, a fight with Alexia turned physical. The way he told it, the whole argument started because he turned down sex. It escalated to shouting and shoving. He claimed he just snapped and ended up strangling her with his bare hands. That was his first real confession, but just a few days later, he changed his story yet again. When court hearings rolled around in December, Jonathan tried to pin it back on his brother-in-law, Gregory Gay, insisting Gregory was the one who lost it and killed Alexia. This new tale contradicted his own confession. For Alexia's family, these constant reversals felt like deliberate lies to twist the truth. On December 7th, 2018, they set up a face-to-face showdown between Jonathan and the Fouillot family. With the pressure on and looking Alexia's mom right in the eye, Jonathan finally cracked. When they showed him a photo of Alexia, he stopped lying and admitted he was the only one responsible. A massive turning point in the case happened on June 17th, 2019. During a crime scene reenactment, done in the early morning to match the exact conditions of that night, Jonathan walked the detectives through exactly what he did, step by step. He admitted to punching his wife in the face anywhere from 5 to 10 times, finally ending it by choking the life out of her with his bare hands. After figuring out he needed to hide the remains, he hauled the body out to the forest and set it on fire, hoping to wipe out any clues and stop anyone from identifying her. Such confessions completely flipped the script on what investigators originally thought went down. While he'd spent all that time painting the whole thing as just some terrible misfortune, the fresh facts laid bare a calculated chain of brutality involving beatings, choking, purposefully dumping the corpse, and trying to torch the proof. By the summer of 2019, more mental health assessments were tossed into the legal pile. Doctors tagged Jonathan with a personality disorder defined by obsession, a deep hunger for control, and strict habits. A few professionals also spotted issues with psychological erectile dysfunction, which had really cranked up the tension in their marriage. Alexia had made it crystal clear she wanted to be a mom, yet their trouble getting pregnant turned into a constant battlefield. Her text blamed Jonathan for ignoring the problem, while he fired back claiming she was just way too pushy. When 2019 wrapped up, Jonathan's legal strategy had completely fallen apart. Every time he confessed, walked through the crime scene, or saw a shrink, it just hammered home the point that this wasn't some mistake. It was a series of calculated moves designed to keep the real story buried. The trial for Jonathan Duvall kicked off in November of 2020, right when courts were operating under strict health lockdowns. They put up clear dividers, limited the chairs, and made sure everyone inside sat far apart from each other. A panel of 6 people made up the jury, consisting of 5 women and a single guy. Things moved fast, with back-to-back days blocked out for hearing from witnesses and grilling the experts. When day 1 started, the court laid out the heavy accusations, specifically the willful murder of a partner. The head judge went over the main police findings and listed the various stories Jonathan Duvall had spun, ranging from total denial to finally owning up to it. Standing there, the accused admitted he was the one behind Alexia's death, yet he kept framing the whole event as just an argument that went way too far off the rails. Right after that, the specialists were brought in to share their analysis. The medical examiner broke down the specific damage to Alexia's body and verified there were 0 signs of post-mortem sexual abuse. Shrinks concluded that while Jonathan wasn't dealing with any mental break that would let him off the legal hook, his specific character traits and bottled up stress made him a serious danger to society. When the second day rolled around, Alexia's folks took the stand to speak. They demanded a full explanation of the reasons why and the exact timeline that ended in their daughter losing her life. During the next session, Jonathan testified, getting sick to his stomach right as questions started, but continuing after a quick break. He confessed that he knew exactly how deadly it would be when he started squeezing her throat. His lawyer stuck to the story that it was just a sudden snap during a fight, not something he planned out. Various people, from close buddies to people he worked with, painted a picture of how wildly different the couple's personalities were. You had Alexia, who was loud and bossy, versus Jonathan, who was quiet and scared to handle tough talks. They also brought up the constant pressure hanging over them regarding their struggle to have a baby. While these details shed light on their home life, the judge kept reminding everyone that nothing excused the horror of the crime or the cover-up that followed. As the legal battle neared its end, the tension inside that room was about to snap. In the last session, Alexia's mom, Isabel Fuyo, begged Jonathan again to walk them through every single step of what happened. Right then and there, Jonathan dropped to his knees and pleaded for them to forgive him. Still, he didn't offer up any new facts, leading the prosecution to demand a heavy punishment based on all the proof showing he meant to do it. Surprisingly, the Fuya family wasn't out for the harshest sentence possible. All they really wanted was a full, honest confession, and on November 21st, 2020, the decision came down. The jurors convicted Jonathan Duvall for the willful murder of his spouse. The judge handed him a 25-year prison term with a hard rule that he serve at least 12 and a half years before parole is even an option. His legal team decided against fighting the ruling, so Jonathan was shipped off right away to start doing his time. That brought the public chapter of this saga to a close, with the law assigning blame and the town finally knowing exactly who ended Alexia's life. While the civil disputes lingered on, the criminal case closed with a verified confession and a sentence that matched the severity of the offense. After the ruling, the battle for damages began. Her parents sued for emotional distress and financial loss, initially asking for nearly 379,000 euros. His defense team called that excessive and countered with an offer of roughly 165,000 euros. In June of 2022, the Court of Appeals upheld the conviction and fixed the damages at 160,000 euros. At the same time, the family chose to move away from the areas that held those painful memories. If this story hooked you, please hit like and subscribe, since we drop new true crime videos every night. Until the next one, stay sharp and stay safe. Alexia Duvall Fouillac came into this world on February 18th, 1988. She grew up in a prominent family that held a lot of sway in their hometown. Her mom, Isabel Fuyo, served on the city council and was known for standing her ground on civic issues. Her dad, Jean-Pierre, ran a cafe that wasn't just a coffee spot. It was the local hub for horse racing fans.